Some women bring light the moment they walk into a room. Others, well, the light returns the moment they walk out. Now, don't get me wrong, this isn't about bitterness, and it's not about blame. It's about clarity. Because if you've lived long enough, and I know you have, you've seen it for yourself. Not everyone who smiles at you is a friend, and not every hand that you hold is meant to hold yours back. Life's too short to keep giving your time, energy, and hard-earned peace to women who drain you, confuse you, or leave you second-guessing yourself. Especially the ones who hide behind charm, beauty, or those perfectly polished social graces. In today's video, we'll uncover 6 unmistakable signs of bad women. Traits you can't afford to ignore. This isn't about judgment, it's about wisdom, about recognizing who deserves a seat at your table and who's only there to take the bread. As Marcus Aurelius once said, the happiness of your life depends on the quality of your thoughts. I'd add it also depends on the company you keep. Let's sharpen that clarity together. Ready? Let's begin. 1, she's always the victim. The first sign of a bad woman is one many men overlook until it's too late. She's always the victim, and I mean always. It doesn't matter if it's a stranger at the grocery store, her best friend of 20 years, or her last 3 ex-husbands. Somehow in every story, she's the one who got hurt, betrayed, or wronged. You sit across the table from her, listening, nodding, maybe even feeling protective at first. She's convincing. She paints vivid pictures of how unfair life has been to her, how misunderstood she is. And if you're not paying close attention, you might think maybe she just needs someone to treat her right. That's the hook. But the longer you stay, the more you realize. This isn't about past wounds. This is about control. I knew a man, Tom, a good man, steady, kind of mine. He met a woman like this after his divorce. At first, he thought she was refreshingly open. She told him everything, how her ex lied to her, how her boss held her back because he was intimidated by strong women, how her family always took her sister's side growing up. He admired her strength for getting through all that. But as the months passed, the stories never stopped, and they always followed the same script. Everyone was toxic, every job ended unfairly, every friendship ended in betrayal. Eventually, Tom found himself playing a role he didn't sign up for. He was either the hero, constantly reassuring her she was right, or the villain when he disagreed, or heaven forbid, suggested she take some responsibility. This is where it gets dangerous. A woman who sees herself as a perpetual victim will never take ownership of her role in anything. She will rewrite every situation to suit her version of the truth. And if you get close, you'll be dragged into that narrative, often as the next source of her suffering. You'll be the one who let her down, the one who never really understood her. It's a cycle, and it's exhausting. Stoicism teaches us that we cannot control other people. We can only control ourselves. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this and you will find strength. But the woman who clings to victimhood refuses that power. She surrenders to life's circumstances and demands that everyone else bear the weight of her emotions. She will drain your energy, your patience, and if you're not careful, your peace of mind. So what do? You recognize it for what it is. You stop playing the rescuer. You don't take responsibility for someone else's wounds that they refuse to heal. You stay grounded in reason, not emotion. You offer compassion, but you keep your boundaries. And if the stories never change, you step back quietly, firmly. Stoic wisdom reminds us that peace is found within. And if someone repeatedly pulls you into chaos, it's not unkind to walk away. It's wise. 2, she's addicted to drama. The second sign is one you'll feel in your gut before you see it with your eyes. She's addicted to drama. And I don't mean the occasional emotional outburst we're all guilty of now and then. I'm talking about a woman whose entire life seems like an endless stage play. One she's directing, starring in, and rewriting by the hour. If life around her gets too calm, too steady, she'll find a way to light a match and burn it down just to feel alive again. To her, peace is boring. Stability makes her restless, and without even realizing it, you'll be pulled into a cycle of conflict, confusion, and emotional chaos that never seems to end. The pattern usually starts small. Maybe one day she's upset because you were distracted while she was telling a story. or you didn't text back quickly enough, and suddenly it's proof you're pulling away. What was a quiet evening turns into an argument you didn't see coming. You spend hours trying to explain yourself, apologizing for something you don't fully understand, and by the end of it, you're the one exhausted while she seems strangely energized. That's the thing about people who thrive on drama. It gives them a sense of control. Chaos becomes their comfort zone because it keeps them at the center of attention. The world spins around their emotions, and everyone else is left trying to keep up. From a Stoic point of view, this behavior makes perfect sense when you strip it down. Seneca once wrote, "An angry man opens his mouth and shuts his eyes." And this applies here. A person addicted to drama isn't interested in truth or resolution. She's interested in the feeling of power that comes with stirring emotions, whether her own or yours. She loses sight of reason because she's blinded by impulse and emotion. She's not looking for harmony. She's looking for stimulation. And if you happen to be the nearest source of it, you'll be caught in the crossfire. The real danger for you is how easy it is to get swept up in it. You may tell yourself that you're helping, that you're calming things down, but you're not. You're playing your part in her drama, whether you mean to or not. And over time, it chips away at your peace, your clarity, and eventually your sense of self. You become reactive, anxious, walking on eggshells, wondering what will trigger the next storm. And when a man loses his inner stillness, he loses his greatest power. The solution: distance. Not necessarily physical at first, but emotional. Step back. Let the waves crash without jumping in to save anything. Observe, but don't participate. As Epictetus taught, we can't control others. We can only control how we respond. And sometimes the wisest response is silence, space, and the refusal to engage in someone else's chaos. You're not obligated to be an actor in anyone's drama. Your role as a Stoic man is to remain grounded, steady, and above all, free. 3. She controls through guilt. Did you know that guilt is one of the most effective tools of psychological control? Studies show it activates the same regions of the brain associated with physical pain. That's why it feels heavy, that sinking feeling in your chest, the tightness in your gut. It's not all in your head. And some women, the wrong women, know exactly how to pull those strings. The third sign of a bad woman is this: she controls through guilt. Not directly, not openly, but in quiet, calculated ways that make you second-guess your own decisions. At first, it seems like she's just sensitive. Maybe she gets upset when you cancel plans to focus on something important at work. Maybe she goes quiet when you suggest taking a little time for yourself. You think she just needs reassurance, so you offer it. You cancel your plans. You rearrange your priorities, and each time you give up a small piece of yourself to avoid seeing that disappointed look in her eyes. You know, the one that says, "I thought you were different. I thought I mattered more." She never has to say it out loud. Her silence is enough. Her sigh is enough. You start to feel like you're failing her. Like no matter how hard you try, it's never quite enough. And here's the tricky part. You don't even realize it's happening until you've already crossed your own boundaries. You're no longer making decisions based on reason or values. You're reacting. You're trying to avoid the feeling of guilt that creeps in whenever you do something for yourself instead of for her. And this is how she keeps control. Guilt becomes the currency she trades in, and the more you pay, the more she demands. Not always with words, but with gestures, moods, and the careful withdrawal of affection. You find yourself explaining your choices more than making them. You become the villain in her story if you don't meet unspoken expectations. Slowly, you stop being yourself and start playing a role she's written for you. Stoic philosophy has an answer for this. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And this is the core of it. When you allow guilt to guide your actions, you have already surrendered your freedom. Guilt clouds judgment. It pulls you into a cycle of appeasement where you lose sight of your own purpose and values. The solution isn't to fight or argue. It's to set clear, steady boundaries. To act from reason, not from fear. You offer what you choose to offer, not because you're avoiding punishment, but because it aligns with who you are. And when she tries to pull on those old strings of guilt, you remain still, calm, resolved. A man who knows his values, who stands firm in them, is free. And freedom is something no amount of guilt can ever take from you unless you give it away. 4. She lacks empathy. The fourth sign is one that often reveals itself when life takes a hard turn. She lacks empathy, and if you've lived long enough, you know one thing for certain. Sooner or later, life will take a hard turn. Maybe you lose someone close. Maybe your health takes a hit. Maybe business goes sideways. In those moments, we all learn who is truly in our corner. A woman who lacks empathy, she won't be there. Or if she is, it's only because she thinks she should be, not because her heart is in it. You'll notice it in small ways at first. Maybe you mention feeling worn out after a brutal week, and she glances up from her phone for half a second before steering the conversation back to something about her day, usually something trivial. Or perhaps you share something personal, something that took a bit of courage to open up about, and instead of leaning in, she brushes past it like it's just another line in a casual conversation. There's a distance there. You feel it. It's not just that she doesn't understand. She doesn't care to. A man I know, someone I respect, once told me about a woman he dated after his wife passed away. At first, she seemed supportive, but when the real weight of his grief surfaced, when he needed someone who could just sit with him in the quiet and be there, she became uncomfortable, restless, impatient. She didn't have the emotional range to meet him where he was. Instead, she changed the subject. She offered shallow reassurances and then steered things back to herself. Her plans, her problems, her life. Eventually, he realized he was lonelier with her than he was by himself. And this is where we bring in Stoic thought. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." But I'd offer this addition. Waste no more time hoping someone will become something they are not. Empathy isn't something you can teach or coax out of someone. It's either there or it's not. And when it's missing, you'll feel it in your bones. An empathetic partner doesn't need to fix you. She doesn't even need to say much. But her presence, steady, calm, and sincere, reminds you that you're not alone. A woman who lacks empathy can sit right next to you, yet you'll feel miles apart. If you find yourself making excuses for why she seems distant during your hardest moments, stop. Pay attention to that feeling. Stoicism teaches us to accept what is, not what we hope for, but what is. And what is in this case is simple. If she cannot meet you with compassion when life gets hard, she will not be there for the storms to come. The solution isn't to demand more from her. It's to choose differently for yourself. Walk away if you must, not in anger, but in clarity. Life's too short to be with someone who listens with their ears, but not their heart. 5. She's obsessed with superficial things. The fifth sign is one that's easy to overlook at first, but over time it will drain the life right out of you. She's obsessed with superficial things, not in a casual, harmless way. This is someone who measures life by appearances, how big the house is, how expensive the shoes are, how many people are watching, liking, and applauding. The things that hold no real weight in the long run, yet they're treated as if they are life itself. Her sense of value is tied to what she can show off, not who she truly is. You may think it's harmless. After all, what's wrong with wanting nice things? But the problem runs deeper. It's not about the things. It's about what they represent to her. Status, approval, superiority. She judges herself, and more importantly, she judges you based on what you can provide on the outside. You'll find yourself feeling like a contestant in an endless competition you never signed up for. Whether you make 6 figures or 7, whether you drive a reliable truck or a luxury car, it's never enough because someone else always has more, and she's always looking for the next rung to climb. The Stoics warned us about this kind of thinking over 2,000 years ago. Epictetus said, "Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants." And yet, a woman who is obsessed with status and appearance is never content. No matter what she gets, it's not satisfaction she feels. It's a momentary high followed by the emptiness of wanting more. It's like trying to fill a broken jar. Everything you pour in leaks right back out. She's caught in the cycle of chasing externals. And if you tie yourself to her, you'll be dragged along for the ride. But here's the truth that Stoicism teaches us. Externals are indifferent. Marcus Aurelius called them things indifferent, meaning they don't add or subtract anything to who you are as a human being. Character is what matters. Virtue, how you live your life and what you stand for. A woman who can't see past the surface will never recognize that in you. no matter how deeply you live by those principles. Seneca said, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." The woman obsessed with superficial things is the poorest kind of companion because she will never know contentment and she will never offer peace. And peace, my friend, is what a Stoic man guards above all else. If you find yourself with someone like this, someone who cares more about how things look than how things truly are, understand this. You will lose yourself if you try to keep up. Your energy, your dignity, your peace. It will be spent chasing shadows. The solution is simple, though not always easy. Walk away, not out of bitterness, but out of wisdom, because a man who values his peace knows when to leave a shallow life behind. 6, she can't admit she's wrong. The sixth sign is one that reveals itself in those small moments of disagreement that turn into something much bigger than they should be. She can't admit she's wrong. Not ever. You could lay out every fact, explain your side with calm reason, even show proof so obvious a child would understand it, and still she'll twist the story to make herself right. And if she can't win on facts, she'll shift the ground beneath your feet. Suddenly, it's no longer about the disagreement at hand, but about how you're making her feel, or how you're attacking her character, or how you always do this. The original point vanishes under an avalanche of emotional deflection. At first, you may think it's just pride, or maybe she's having a bad day. But over time, you realize it's not just occasional stubbornness. It's a pattern. She cannot own her mistakes, no matter how small. She will defend a bad decision, a hurtful comment, or an obvious oversight until the very end. Because in her mind, being wrong equals being weak, and weakness to her is unacceptable. The problem is deeper than mere pride. Psychologically, people who refuse to admit fault often do so because their sense of self is fragile. Accepting blame feels like a threat to their identity, so they fight to protect it at all costs. But when someone makes being right the goal in every interaction, they sacrifice something far more valuable: growth, connection, and trust. Because a person who cannot acknowledge fault cannot learn, and a person who cannot learn cannot grow. The Stoics understood this better than anyone. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If anyone can refute me, show me I'm making a mistake, or looking at things from the wrong perspective, I'll gladly change. It's the truth I'm after." That's the mark of real wisdom, the ability to welcome correction as an opportunity, not an attack. When you find someone who rejects that principle, you'll find yourself in a relationship where your perspective is always under suspicion, and the weight of being the reasonable one always falls on your shoulders. That burden is exhausting and it's lonely. A relationship like this becomes less about connection and more about control. And the irony is, by refusing to admit fault, she loses the very thing Stoics believe gives life its purpose: the pursuit of truth. If she can't say the simple words, "I was wrong," she's not just protecting her pride. She's walling herself off from growth, understanding, and ultimately from love itself. For a Stoic man, this is where clarity becomes essential. You must choose humility and truth in your own life, and you must choose a partner who does the same. Not because she's perfect, but because she's willing to be imperfect and brave enough to admit it. Without that humility, there's no partnership, only competition. And life is too short to spend it keeping score. Seneca said, "Only time can heal what reason cannot." But in a relationship where reason is never allowed a seat at the table, time only makes things worse. The solution? Seek someone who knows that saying "I was wrong" isn't a weakness, but one of the highest forms of strength. And if she can't offer that, then in truth, it's time to walk away. Not out of anger, but out of respect for yourself and for the life of wisdom and peace you're building. 7, she disrespects your time. If life has taught us anything by this age, it's that time is the one currency we never get back. Money, you can earn it. Health, you can fight for it. But time, once it's spent, it's gone. That's why a woman who disrespects your time isn't just careless. She's dangerous to your peace of mind. And if you're not careful, she'll steal years from you in small, silent ways that you won't even notice until it's too late. I remember a man named Richard used to work with in Houston, a successful contractor, mid-50s, one of those men who had built everything he had from the ground up. Sharp, disciplined, respected. But in his personal life, it was another story. Richard had started seeing a woman named Elise, and at first she was charming. She had the looks, the warmth, and she knew how to make a man feel wanted. But there was a pattern. She was always late, 20 minutes, then 40. She'd cancel plans last minute because she wasn't feeling up to it or something important came up. Sometimes she'd simply forget altogether. Richard, being the patient man he was, let it slide. At first he figured it was just life. Things get busy. We all know how that is. But weeks turned into months. Richard found himself shifting his work schedule to fit hers. He waited in restaurants alone. He delayed trips and canceled fishing weekends with old friends because Elise said she really wanted to see him that day, only to bail without a second thought. I'll never forget sitting across from him one afternoon watching him stare at his phone after she'd stood him up again. He just shook his head and said, "Man, I feel like I'm always waiting." That's what happens when someone disrespects your time. They keep you waiting, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. And if you're not careful, they'll make you believe it's normal, that you need to be more understanding, that this is just how things are now, but a Stoic man knows better. Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." And that's the truth Richard came to realize. Elise wasn't busy. She wasn't forgetful. She simply didn't value his time because she didn't value him. And he had allowed it by not valuing his own time first. The solution isn't confrontation or ultimatums. It's clarity. Respect your own time as fiercely as you respect your life because they are one and the same. A woman who honors you will honor your time. She will show up when she says she will. She will treat your minutes as something sacred because they are. Epictetus asked, "How long are you going to wait before you demand the best for yourself?" Richard stopped waiting, and so should you. Time wasted is life wasted. Spend yours where it's valued. I would love to hear about your journey and triumphs. Please hit subscribe. Turn on the notification bell and leave a comment below to share your story, your success, and even the challenges you've overcome. If you're not sure what to comment, just write, "I love this," to show that you've completed this session. Your engagement helps this community grow toward wisdom and the art of turning every challenge into an opportunity. And here is the second video. This one will give you another side of Stoicism. Now, before you think I'm here to bash marriage, relax. I'm a fan of love, but sometimes staying can do more damage than leaving ever could. Sometimes the bravest thing a man can do is grab his dignity, pack up his self-respect, and walk out the door like he's Clint Eastwood in a spaghetti western. If that hits home, you're not alone. In this video, we're going to break down 6 clear signs. It might be time to cut ties with your wife. Whether you've been married 5 years or you try harder, you stay longer, hoping that if you just love more, give more, things will get better. But over time, something starts to happen that you can't quite explain. You don't laugh the way you used to. You second-guess yourself constantly. You feel smaller, not because you've changed, but because the weight of the relationship has chipped away at you, your dignity, your self-respect, your joy. It's not just the marriage that's broken, it's you. And you keep asking yourself, when did I lose myself trying to save something that was already gone? I've been there. I know what it's like to wake up next to someone and feel completely alone, to walk on eggshells in your own home, to wonder if maybe this is just what life is supposed to be now. Quiet desperation behind closed doors. And for a long time, I told myself what a lot of men do. This is just how it goes. We're raised to endure, to fix, to hold it all together no matter the cost. But here's what they don't tell you. Some things aren't meant to be fixed, and some battles aren't meant to be fought forever. There's a point where staying isn't strength anymore. It's self-destruction. Stoic philosophy teaches us that the only thing truly in our control is our mind, our choices, our actions, our peace. We can't control another person's behavior or how much they love us or whether they're capable of change. But we can control when we say enough. We can control when we choose to stop pouring ourselves into something that only takes and never gives back. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this and you will find strength. And that's the truth I had to face. Staying in a marriage that robs you of your peace isn't loyalty. It's a form of surrendering your life to someone else's chaos. You're not here to be someone's emotional punching bag. You are not here to slowly disappear just because you made a promise. Promises work both ways, and if you're the only one keeping yours, it's time to reconsider who you're keeping them with. Walking away isn't failure. It's choosing your peace over their poison. And if you've felt that hollow ache, that loss of who you are, this isn't just a thought to sit with. It's your moment to act. Your life, your freedom, and your peace are waiting on the other side of letting go. Now comes the first sign. She constantly disrespects you. Respect is the foundation of every lasting relationship. Without it, love suffocates. It doesn't happen all at once. At first, it's small. She interrupts you when you're talking, dismisses your opinions in front of family, laughs when you share something important, and you brush it off thinking it's just a mood. She doesn't mean it, but over time, something inside you begins to shrink. You stop offering ideas. You stop dreaming out loud. You avoid certain conversations because you know how they'll end with her rolling her eyes, cutting you off, or tearing you down. You start to feel like a guest in your own home. Worse, a stranger to yourself. I knew a man named Richard. He wasn't flashy, no millionaire, just a decent man who worked hard his whole life as a mechanic. Built a small garage from nothing. People trusted him. In his shop, he was respected. At home, different story. His wife controlled everything, the money, the conversations, the decisions. She treated him like he was slow, talked to him like he was a child who couldn't be trusted to get things right. Over time, Richard's confidence vanished. He stopped going out with friends. He stopped talking about his ideas for the business. He just showed up, did his job, and went home. He used to have this spark, this pride in the life he built. But by the time I met him, he was a shell of the man he used to be. He admitted it quietly one day. I feel like I don't exist anymore. That's what chronic disrespect does to a man. It wears down your sense of self until you forget who you were before. Stoic philosophy teaches us we can't control how someone treats us, only how we respond. But here's the catch. If you respond by staying in an environment where you're disrespected day in and day out, you're slowly teaching yourself to accept it. You're sending yourself the message that you don't deserve better. And that is a dangerous thing. The Stoics also teach that our peace is our responsibility. Marcus Aurelius said, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." If your thoughts are shaped by constant disrespect and criticism, you will never know peace. You'll live in quiet misery, convincing yourself this is just how life is. But it isn't. Not for a man who knows his worth. Richard made a choice. He left. It wasn't easy. It never is. But over time, he built a new life. One where his voice mattered again. Where he could look in the mirror and recognize the man staring back. That's what happens when you reclaim your dignity. You remember who you are. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't to stay and endure, but to leave and rebuild. Because a man who demands respect first has to give it to himself. 2, she manipulates you through guilt. There's a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from always feeling like you're not enough. No matter what you do, no matter how much you give, it's like pouring water into a well with no bottom. You give more of your time, your energy, your patience, thinking that if you just try harder, love better, be more understanding, maybe things will get better. But they don't. Instead, the goalposts keep moving, the rules keep changing, and you realize you're playing a game you can't win. I knew a man named Thomas. He worked in construction, a man who put in long days, 10, 12 hours under the sun, his hands calloused, his body aching by the time he got home. And yet, when he walked through his front door, there was no peace. His wife accused him of caring more about work than family. If he was tired and needed rest, he was selfish. If he wanted time alone to clear his head, he was cold and distant. And when he tried to explain himself, to share how hard he was working to provide for their family, she turned his words against him. She'd bring up every past mistake, every argument they'd ever had, like she was reading from a ledger. There was no forgiveness, no moving forward, only reminders that he wasn't good enough. Thomas thought if he explained himself better, if he just worked harder at being the husband she wanted, things might change. But they didn't. That's what emotional manipulation looks like. It's subtle at first, a comment here, a sigh there, but soon it becomes a pattern. You find yourself questioning your own feelings, doubting your own needs. You begin to feel guilty for wanting simple things like rest, quiet, or time to think. You stop trusting your instincts, and that's when they have you. Because the person who controls your emotions controls your life. The Stoics teach that we can't control the actions of others, but we can control how we respond. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." But if you're allowing someone to guilt you into submission every day, if you're staying silent while they twist your emotions and make you doubt yourself, you've surrendered that power. You've handed over your mind, and a man who loses his mind to someone else's control loses himself. Thomas eventually reached his breaking point. He realized he was living like a puppet, his strings pulled by guilt and fear. He wasn't showing strength by staying. He was showing weakness by allowing it to continue. So he made the choice to leave. It wasn't easy. There were nights he doubted himself, questioned whether he was doing the right thing. But slowly he started to feel his mind clear. His sense of self returned. He wasn't walking on eggshells anymore. He was walking on solid ground. Manipulation isn't love, it's control. And no man is here to live on someone else's leash. If you're in a marriage where guilt has become the chain that keeps you there, it's time to break it. The Stoics remind us, protect your mind. Guard it like your life depends on it, because in many ways it does. 3, there's zero emotional support. Marriage is meant to be a refuge, a place where you can lay down your armor and rest. Life is hard enough on its own. You fight battles out there in the world. Work pressures, financial strain, loss, illness. You come home at the end of the day needing peace, connection, someone who understands without you having to explain it. But for some men, home isn't a refuge, it's another battlefield. And sometimes the silence is more brutal than any argument. There's a specific kind of loneliness that comes from being in a marriage without emotional connection. You feel it most when life gets heavy. You carry grief, fear, exhaustion, and the person who once vowed to stand beside you feels distant, detached. It's not the absence of words that cuts the deepest, it's the absence of care. You reach out for support and find nothing but cold indifference. Maybe she's there physically sitting in the same room, but emotionally she's gone. You talk about what you're going through and it's met with a shrug or worse, irritation, as if your pain is inconvenient. And in those moments, you understand something you've been denying for a long time. You're on your own. That realization isn't easy to face. It's one thing to be alone in life. It's another to be alone in marriage. You start to question yourself. Maybe you're expecting too much. Maybe you should be stronger. Stoic philosophy teaches us to endure hardship with dignity, to be self-sufficient in our suffering, but it doesn't teach us to tolerate a partner who makes the suffering heavier. Stoicism is about strengthening the mind, not hardening the heart. So much that we accept emotional neglect as normal. When a marriage becomes emotionally barren, it erodes something vital in a man. You stop seeking connection because the rejection is too painful. You bury your feelings so deep you forget what it's like to feel it all. The relationship becomes mechanical, a series of motions without meaning. You might share a house, but you're not sharing a life. And over time, that emptiness starts to shape you. It chips away at your sense of worth. Because if the person who promised to stand by you in sickness and in health can't offer you the smallest ounce of compassion, you start to wonder if you deserve any, but you do. Every man does. Stoicism reminds us that while we must be strong, we are also human. We need connection. We need warmth. We need someone who will sit with us in the dark, not tell us the dark isn't real. If you find yourself in a marriage where there's no empathy, no shared grief, no emotional support, it's time to ask yourself a hard question. Are you holding on to a marriage or just a contract with someone who's already left you emotionally? Leaving isn't weakness. It's choosing to stop living like a ghost in your own life. Stoicism doesn't ask us to suffer needlessly. It asks us to take responsibility for our own peace. And sometimes that means cutting ties, not out of anger, but out of self-respect. Because a life spent in emotional isolation is not a life well lived. It's a life half lived. And you deserve more. If you found these insights valuable, let me know by commenting yes below. Your thoughts matter, and I'd love to hear from you. 4. she sabotages your growth. There's a unique kind of pain that comes from realizing the person who should be your greatest supporter is instead the one quietly holding you back. You take steps toward becoming a better man. You push yourself to improve, to grow, to rise above the person you were yesterday. But instead of encouragement, you find resistance. Subtle at first, almost easy to dismiss. A dismissive comment when you share your plans. A sarcastic remark when you commit to something new. A cold shoulder when you celebrate an accomplishment. Over time, it becomes clear. Every time you try to move forward, she finds a way to pull you back. What makes this so destructive is that it's rarely obvious. It's not a battle fought out loud. It's a slow erosion of your confidence and momentum. You sign up for a course to expand your skills, and she questions why you're wasting your time. You start taking care of your health, and she tempts you back into old habits, laughing it off as no big deal. You earn a hard-won success, and instead of pride in her eyes, you see indifference or worse, insecurity. What you begin to understand is that your growth threatens her sense of control. She fears who you are becoming because it reminds her of who she refuses to be. And so rather than walk beside you, she works to keep you in place. Stoic philosophy is clear on this. The path of a man should be a constant ascent. Epictetus taught that you must first decide who you wish to be and then do what must be done to become that man. But if you're tied to someone who fights against that vision, your energy gets wasted in a battle you should never have to fight. You find yourself stuck in a cycle of trying to balance your own progress with managing her discomfort. That is not partnership. That is sabotage disguised as love. A marriage is supposed to be an alliance, not a competition. If she views your self-improvement as a threat rather than a shared victory, you are not in a healthy relationship. You're in a situation where your wings are being clipped every time they start to spread. The Stoic doesn't beg to change. He doesn't try to drag anyone along who doesn't want to grow. He focuses on his own path and protects it fiercely. Sometimes the most courageous act of growth is to let go of what keeps you small. If your marriage holds you in place, it's no longer love, it's fear. And no man should live his life weighted down by fear disguised as loyalty. Growth requires freedom, and freedom often requires letting go. 5. You live in fear, not peace. I once spoke with a man who described his marriage like a war zone, not with fists or screaming matches, but with tension so thick it weighed down every moment of his day. He said he found himself constantly calculating what to say, when to say it, and how to say it, just to avoid triggering another emotional explosion from his wife. It wasn't that he didn't love her. He had once, but over time, love had turned into fear. Fear of conflict, fear of rejection, fear of becoming the target of her unpredictable moods. And so he stopped speaking freely. He stopped being himself. He shrank inside the walls of his own home, thinking that if he stayed quiet long enough, maybe things would stay calm. But they never did. He told himself he was keeping the peace. What he didn't realize was that his silence wasn't peace at all. It was surrender. Marriage is not meant to be a battlefield where you're dodging emotional landmines, never knowing when one wrong step will set off the next explosion. A man should never feel afraid in his own home. When you find yourself walking on eggshells, filtering every word and thought for fear of how she might react, that's not love. It's fear. And fear eats away at a man's soul more quietly, but just as surely as any open conflict. The Stoics teach us that true peace comes from within, from mastering our own minds and not being ruled by the actions or emotions of others. Marcus Aurelius spoke of the deep tranquility that comes when we focus only on our own conduct, not on how others behave. But that teaching comes with a responsibility. If a man stays in an environment where his peace is constantly under siege, where his days are spent anticipating another attack, he is not practicing Stoic endurance. He's abandoning his duty to protect his own soul. Emotional safety is not a luxury in marriage. It's the foundation. If your wife becomes a source of anxiety rather than a partner in peace, you are living in a prison, not a partnership. And the longer you stay silent, the more you lose yourself. Silence in the face of constant fear is not strength. It's slow spiritual death. The Stoic man understands that he cannot control his wife's emotions or behavior, but he can control where he places himself. He can control when it's time to walk away. And if your marriage has become a place where you no longer feel safe to speak, to think, to be who you are, it's time to choose yourself. Because peace is not something you find in silence. It's something you create by removing yourself from what destroys it. 6. She betrays your trust repeatedly. I once knew a man named Michael. From the outside, he looked like he had everything figured out. Steady job, 2 kids, a house he had worked his entire life to afford. But if you sat with him long enough, his eyes told another story. They held the weight of a man who had been lied to more times than he could count. His wife, Lauren, had betrayed him not once but 3 times. First, it was messages she swore were harmless. Then it was an affair she promised would never happen again. The 3rd time, she didn't even bother denying it, and still Michael stayed. He told himself he was staying for the family, that forgiveness was noble, that people make mistakes, and that maybe if he just loved her enough, she would finally stop hurting him. But each time he forgave, the promises meant less. The apologies grew thinner. It wasn't just the affairs that broke him. It was the way she looked him in the eye and lied without hesitation, knowing he would forgive her again. Over time, Michael didn't just lose trust in her, he lost trust in himself. He questioned his worth as a man, as a husband, as someone who deserved loyalty. Trust is everything in a marriage. Without it, what's left is just the shell of something that used to be alive. You can try to fill it with patience. You can try to hold it together with hope. But when trust is shattered again and again, it's no longer an accident. It's a decision. A decision by someone who sees your forgiveness not as grace, but as permission to keep crossing the line. And the longer you accept it, the more you are telling yourself that this is all you're worth. The Stoics were clear on this. Forgiveness is a strength, but only when paired with wisdom. Seneca said, "It is the power of the mind to be unconquerable." But Michael wasn't unconquerable. He was living in surrender, quietly giving away his dignity, one betrayal at a time. A Stoic doesn't stay where his peace is constantly under attack. He doesn't confuse endurance with self-destruction. If trust in your marriage has become a revolving door of betrayal and hollow apologies, you have a decision to make, not out of anger, but out of clarity. You can choose to stay in a cycle that breaks you, or you can step away and reclaim your strength. Michael eventually did. It took years, but when he finally left, he said it was the first time in a long time he could look in the mirror and respect the man staring back. You deserve loyalty, you deserve honesty, and sometimes the only way to find it is to walk away from where it no longer exists. Now, I want to tell you deeper meaning. Cutting ties isn't failure. It's the moment a man chooses to stop living in quiet suffering and begins reclaiming his life. I've seen too many men believe that walking away from a broken marriage is giving up, that if they leave, they're somehow weaker, less loyal, less honorable. But the truth is there's nothing noble about staying in a place that drains the life out of you. A place where dignity is chipped away piece by piece, where peace is a distant memory. The Stoics never taught us to be martyrs. They never said that virtue meant allowing yourself to be slowly destroyed by someone else's neglect or cruelty. They taught us to live with clarity, with virtue, with dignity. And sometimes that clarity leads you to one simple, undeniable conclusion. Enough. I've known men who stayed far too long because they were afraid of what people would think, afraid of being alone, afraid they were giving up too soon. But your life isn't a performance for others. It isn't about meeting someone else's expectations. It's your one brief chance to live in truth. And if the truth is that your marriage has become a place of pain instead of peace, it's not weakness to leave, it's wisdom. The Stoics remind us that our highest responsibility is to ourselves to cultivate a life of purpose and integrity. You can't do that if you're chained to something that breaks you. Walking away is not an act of anger. It's an act of clarity. It's choosing to stop waiting for something that will never change, and instead choosing yourself to breathe again, to rebuild your peace, because no one else can do that for you. And you don't need permission, you need courage. So if you found yourself nodding along to these signs, maybe even feeling that knot in your chest loosen just a little, take that as your signal. Sometimes the strongest thing a man can do isn't to hold on, it's to let go. To walk away with your dignity intact, your head high, and your peace finally within reach. Life's too short to live as a stranger in your own home. You deserve more than being stuck in a one-sided marriage that drains you. And remember, cutting ties isn't quitting. It's choosing yourself. It's making space for the man you're meant to become. If this message hit home, don't leave it here. Hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications, because we're building something real here. Courage, clarity, and a little humor to get through the hard stuff. Drop a comment and share your story. Or just write, "I'm ready." If today's the day you reclaim your life, you're not alone in this. Not here. Let's walk this road together. See you in the next video. And here is the third video. This video will give you another perspective on Stoicism. Sometimes it's not the shouting that gives her away. It's the silence between her sentences, the little phrases, the casual remarks, the subtle digs wrapped in confidence and coated with charm. Foolishness doesn't always come with drama. Sometimes it hides behind what sounds like empowerment, self-awareness, or honesty. But for the trained ear, for the Stoic mind, these words ring hollow, because what sounds like strength is often ego. What sounds like insight is often deflection. And what sounds like just being real is often emotional immaturity in disguise. The Stoics said, "Speech is the mirror of the soul." And when a woman keeps repeating the same toxic phrases, she isn't just speaking. She's revealing everything about how she sees herself, you, and the world around her. In this video, we expose 6 things stupid women say, not to mock, not to insult, but to sharpen your discernment. Because the moment you recognize these phrases for what they are, you stop reacting and start reclaiming your clarity. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment. I see through it. Now let's begin, because once you hear these words, you won't unhear them. And that's the first step toward freedom. 1, I'm just being honest. One of the most deceptively damaging phrases you'll ever hear from a woman is, "I'm just being honest." At first it sounds noble, truthful, straightforward. But look closely. This phrase is rarely used in the spirit of truth. It's not meant to build clarity. It's designed to cut, to inflict, to walk the line between cruelty and credibility without ever being held accountable. It usually follows a remark that hits below the belt. Maybe a swipe at your intelligence, your career progress, or something deeply personal like your role as a father. And when you raise an eyebrow or step back to reflect, she won't apologize. She'll simply blame your reaction. Don't be so sensitive. In that moment, you're not dealing with a truth teller. You're dealing with someone weaponizing directness as a shield for their emotional immaturity. A woman who lives by that phrase doesn't value truth. She values control. She wants to see how far she can push before you flinch. I once knew a man, retired Navy, whose wife had a habit of saying it like it is. Over the years, her honesty chipped away at his confidence. At first, it was about his parenting, how he wasn't stern enough. Then it was about his body, how he'd let himself go since leaving active duty. Later, it turned into jabs about his ambition, how other men his age were still building while he was content with his pension. Whenever he tried to express discomfort, she'd call him taunt, laugh, or accuse him of twisting her words. He stayed silent for years, believing that enduring her honesty was the price of love. But that's not love, that's erosion. The Stoics warned us that cruelty often disguises itself as virtue. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Kindness is invincible provided it is sincere." And that's the key. Sincerity, not domination, not manipulation. A Stoic man doesn't shy away from truth, but he knows truth isn't a dagger, it's a mirror. And if someone only uses it to stab, they aren't seeking clarity, they're seeking power. A woman who constantly drops verbal grenades and hides behind the excuse of being real is not being authentic. She's testing your limits. She's watching to see if your boundaries are firm or if your silence can be bought with discomfort. This is where Stoicism becomes not just a philosophy, but armor. Epictetus reminds us it's not what happens to you, but how you react that matters. The wise man doesn't argue back, doesn't perform anger. He recognizes what's happening and removes the audience. Because when someone shows you that their version of honesty is cruelty wrapped in confidence, there's only one lesson left to learn. You don't owe your presence to someone who confuses destruction with depth. Now we move forward to another phrase just as corrosive but more seductive. It's the kind of sentence that sounds like self-awareness, but is really a warning. One that says, I'm not changing. You'll just have to survive me. 2, if you can't handle me at my worst. According to psychological studies on relationship dynamics, one of the strongest predictors of long-term emotional distress in men is prolonged exposure to unpredictable emotional outbursts. Not violence, not infidelity, but chronic instability disguised as authenticity. And no phrase signals that more clearly than the modern favorite. If you can't handle me at my worst, you don't deserve me at my best. What sounds empowering is in reality a cleverly romanticized excuse for erratic behavior. It tells you without shame that she's not interested in accountability, only indulgence. It's not a plea for understanding. It's a demand for unconditional tolerance without reciprocal effort. This phrase is often tossed out after an emotional blow-up, a pattern of disrespect, or a trail of bad decisions that she refuses to own. It's a deflection tactic, one that reframes her volatility as a test of your loyalty. But here's the reality. A woman who brandishes her worst self like a warning label is not preparing you for trust. She's warning you that chaos is her currency, and if you accept it once, you'll be paying for it forever. A Stoic man, however, does not audition for tolerance. He doesn't prove his worth by enduring storms that never end. He doesn't stay to show how much he can take. He stays when there is peace to build, not chaos to survive. The man who has walked through his own inner fire, who has faced trauma, aging, failure, and grief, doesn't view drama as passion. He views it as erosion. And the moment a woman presents her worst, like it's a permanent fixture instead of a season she's trying to grow from, he sees it for what it is, a red flag waving proudly in broad daylight. Stoicism teaches us that strength is not found in how much pain you can tolerate from others. It's found in the discernment to choose peace even when chaos is packaged as love. Marcus Aurelius said, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." And a man who spends his days anticipating the next emotional explosion isn't thinking with clarity. He's surviving on emotional eggshells. That's not nobility. That's slow decay. When she says, "If you can't handle me at my worst, understand this," what she's really saying is, "I will not change, and you will have to." And once you buy into that contract, your own identity begins to shrink. Your boundaries bend, your silence becomes submission. And slowly, your presence in the relationship becomes less about mutual growth and more about containment. The Stoic man does not submit to fire just to prove he's strong. He walks where the air is clear. And when a woman confuses unpredictability with depth, he doesn't argue. He exits without noise, without insult, without apology. Next, we move to a more venomous phrase, one that strikes directly at your masculinity, not to challenge it, but to control it. 3, you're not man enough. One of the most subtle forms of manipulation doesn't sound angry. It sounds daring. It's when a woman looks you in the eye after dismissing your values, minimizing your voice, and then says something calculated like, "You're not man enough." That's not a conversation. It's a provocation. It's not meant to open a dialogue. It's designed to strike a nerve. She's not trying to understand you. She's trying to see how fast you'll perform. It's a trap to lure you in a reaction, to hijack your composure and make your strength about how loudly you can respond rather than how quietly you can stay grounded. The tragedy is that many men fall for it, not because they're weak, but because they've been taught that masculinity must be defended on demand. But that's not strength. That's slavery to her approval. A Stoic man sees this dynamic for what it is, a game of bait and control. When someone uses your identity as leverage, it means they never respected it in the first place. The moment you start performing your worth instead of living it, you've already handed it over. True strength isn't loud. It doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need to take the bait just to prove it can bite. Strength is being unmoved in the face of insult, not because you didn't hear it, but because you know what defines you doesn't come from outside voices. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't be." That's not about denial, it's about ownership. When someone throws a line like, "You're not man enough," what they're really saying is, "I want to see you break." But the Stoic man doesn't dance to prove he has legs. He walks quietly, deliberately, And if someone keeps trying to poke holes in his armor, he doesn't reinforce it with bravado. He removes the audience. Because when a woman repeatedly tests your identity through insult, she's not testing for strength. She's testing for submission. She wants control over your reaction so she can rewrite the narrative that your fire is weakness, that your anger is proof, that your silence is guilt. But silence for the Stoic is not weakness, it's strategy. The man who chooses not to engage in every provocation is not avoiding the fight. He's choosing a higher battlefield, one where dignity wins over drama, where control isn't about volume but presence. The woman who needs you to explode to feel powerful isn't challenging your masculinity. She's confessing her inability to handle a man who doesn't flinch. The next phrase may not insult your manhood outright, but it carries just as much poison. It's the kind of sentence that hides behind pride, independence, and defiance. And if you mistake it for confidence, you'll find yourself giving to someone who's already convinced she needs nothing from you. 4. I don't need a man. When a woman loudly proclaims, "I don't need a man," it rarely comes from a place of quiet power. More often, it comes from accumulated resentment spoken after years of unresolved tension, failed connections, and unacknowledged wounds. This isn't the voice of independence. It's the echo of defense. The volume isn't confidence. It's the sound of someone trying to convince herself that isolation is a victory. A truly grounded woman doesn't need to broadcast her independence. She embodies it with grace, with calm, with stillness. But the woman who uses this phrase like a badge is often signaling something deeper. Not a rejection of men, but a frustration with her inability to coexist with one without friction. And the more she repeats this line, the more she unconsciously prepares herself for another war, not a partnership. The mistake many men make is believing that this attitude is strength. They hear it and think she's powerful. But soon they find their support turn into the next thing she pushes away. Not because she doesn't want help, but because accepting it would force her to soften. And softening for her feels like vulnerability, a language she no longer speaks. A Stoic man doesn't argue with declarations like this. He doesn't try to fix it. He doesn't plead to be the exception. He simply listens, evaluates, and steps back with dignity. Because when someone defines themselves by absence, by what they claim not to need, they've already decided to hold power through distance. And the worst thing you can do is hand over your emotional investment to someone who's built their identity around keeping it out. The Stoic path isn't about changing others. It's about refusing to be changed by those who resist connection but demand presence. Marcus Aurelius said, "Withdraw into yourself." The rational soul is its own shelter. And when you're faced with someone who claims they don't need you, believe them without anger, without argument, and without apology. Because sometimes the most self-loving act isn't staying to prove you're valuable. It's walking away without needing to be valued at all. What comes next is even more dangerous. Not loud, not defiant, but deceptively gentle. It's a phrase that wears the mask of trauma and victimhood, but behind it is a story that never includes growth. And if you're not careful, you'll find yourself fighting ghosts you didn't create, all while being cast as the villain. 5. All my exes were toxic. When a woman tells you that every man in her past was toxic, pause. Because what she's offering isn't just a glimpse into her history, it's a confession about how she tells stories. Not one ex, not two, all of them. And while trauma is real, this kind of sweeping declaration doesn't point to healing. It points to a pattern. The Stoic man hears what's missing. No reflection, no responsibility, no nuance. Just one continuous loop where she's always the victim and everyone else is cast as a villain. It's not her pain that's alarming. It's her relationship with it, because someone who has truly grown through suffering doesn't keep using it as their introduction. I knew a man mid-50s, twice divorced, who met a woman that seemed deeply self-aware. She was charming, intelligent, and spoke about her past with raw emotion. But over time, it became clear every story ended the same way. He lied. He ruined me. He was a narcissist. After months of listening, he finally asked her, "What part did you play in any of this?" She went silent, offended by the question, as if accountability was betrayal. He stayed longer than he should have, believing his patience would inspire change. Instead, his patience was seen as permission, and her story just swallowed him too. Seneca warned, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." And some people don't just suffer from that illusion, they build their identity around it. They turn pain into performance. And when you're the next man in the story, don't think you'll be treated differently. You're not being chosen, you're being assigned a role. She'll script it, edit it, and eventually rewrite it. And when conflict comes, as it always does, it won't be met with communication or introspection. It'll be met with a pre-written narrative just like the rest of them. A Stoic man knows that a person's relationship with their past reveals everything about how they'll treat their present. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. But a woman who still blames every man in her rearview mirror is not advancing. She's circling. And if you attach yourself to that orbit, you'll find yourself paying debts you didn't create. You don't need her to be perfect, but you do need her to be honest. And real honesty doesn't sanitize the past, it owns it. The woman who always casts herself as the hero or the victim isn't ready for partnership. She's still trapped in theater. And you were meant for something quieter, something steady, something that doesn't need rehearsed grief to feel meaningful. What's next is subtle, but even more dangerous. A phrase that sounds like strength, but is almost always used when integrity is no longer present. It's not about connection, it's about control. And it's time we talk about the most misused word in the female vocabulary, worth. 6. I know my worth. Studies in behavioral psychology have shown that individuals who frequently talk about their self-worth are often compensating for deep-seated insecurity, not demonstrating actual confidence. In other words, the louder the proclamation, the emptier the core. So when a woman looks at you and says, "I know my worth," don't assume you're hearing the voice of a stable, self-possessed woman. In many cases, what you're really hearing is a practiced line, one that's been rehearsed, repeated, and often weaponized. This isn't about genuine value, it's about performance. It's a phrase that typically emerges when she's being challenged about her behavior, her expectations, her inconsistencies. Rather than reflect or reassess, she declares her worth loudly, sharply, with conviction, but without substance. True worth is never announced. It's lived. It's consistent. It doesn't need defending because it's recognized through grace, patience, character, and boundaries. The woman who truly knows her value doesn't need to tell you. She shows you quietly through how she carries herself when no one's watching. But the one who uses "I know my worth" as a verbal shield is rarely talking about worth at all. What she's really referencing is her price, the standard she uses to justify entitlement, overreaction, and walking away from accountability whenever it feels uncomfortable. It's not about value, it's about leverage. A Stoic man recognizes this immediately. He knows the difference between value and volume, and he refuses to enter debates about someone's self-declared greatness. He doesn't validate false power with attention. He simply listens, observes, and steps away when what's presented as strength is actually resistance to growth. Marcus Aurelius said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." The same applies here. When someone has to constantly affirm their worth with words, they are by nature uncertain of it themselves. The danger isn't in the phrase, it's in the emotional transaction it creates. You start feeling like you have to prove something. You start justifying your standards, explaining your boundaries, defending your expectations. And before you realize it, you're negotiating with someone who's never been open to alignment in the first place. Because her version of worth isn't about shared vision, it's about control. And when that control is threatened, she doesn't reflect. She doubles down. The Stoic path is clear. You don't debate inflated egos. You don't try to fix what doesn't want to evolve. You simply stay rooted in your own clarity. You don't need to insult her, correct her, or win her over. You just don't engage. And that silence, that stillness, it's not avoidance, it's the highest form of self-respect. What comes next isn't a phrase, it's your response. Because after you've heard all 6 of these lines, the question isn't what's wrong with her. The real question is, what will you now do with what you've seen? You don't win by shouting louder. You win by walking away with your peace still intact. Because when a woman reveals herself through the phrases we've just exposed, you don't need to correct her. You only need to believe her. Every word she repeats, every phrase she clings to, tells you exactly how she sees herself and what she expects from you. Tolerance without accountability, patience without balance, and respect she hasn't earned. But a Stoic man doesn't argue with illusions. He doesn't try to rescue someone from a mindset they worship. He simply hears what's real and exits what's not. Marcus Aurelius said the best revenge is to be unlike the one who caused you harm. And that's your quiet power. Not to fight her games, but to rise above them. No lectures, no drama, just presence, then distance. If this video gave you the clarity you needed, don't keep it to yourself. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment. I won't argue with foolishness. I outgrow it because wisdom doesn't beg to be heard. It simply becomes undeniable and leaves everything petty behind in silence.